So, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to everyone with us today. Welcome to another episode or another webinar of Fintech Flares. My name is Ayman Chalhoub. I'm leading the product at Fintech Galaxy. And at Fintech Galaxy, we're having this series of webinars to keep the Middle East and North Africa Fintech community connected. And at Fintech Galaxy, what we do is we provide a Fintech journey platform to take fintechs from a startup phase to a full commercialization and scaling in the region. So it's such a pleasure for me today to have with me Sander Maertens, who's the head of Adyen in the Middle East. And on the heels of the announcement of Adyen opening up their office here in the region, their first in this part of the world, it's an exciting move, and we're looking forward to this discussion. So, Sander, welcome to the Middle East.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
Great. So Sander, this year it's interesting. A lot of people, it was a crazy year, right? And a lot of people have decided to stay home most of the time. What made you decide to kind of move continents, where the rest of the world was really trying to stay inside and indoors as much as possible? So,
believe me, I've spent my fair share indoors as well. No, for me personally, the plan to leave. I've been in Brazil for 6 years to focus on Latin America. For myself, the plan to leave Brazil in the middle of this year. That was there already for a year, so I knew I would leave at some point this year. It obviously went completely different than originally planned. And I went basically to Amsterdam without a plan for myself, what's going to be next. And I had those conversations internally. And for a very long time, for probably 2 years, we actually have been looking at this region. We basically go where our customers go, right? And that's a philosophy we've always had and been very successful for us. But at the global scale where we now operate, we get requests to open up pretty much everywhere where we do not have a local office now. So how do you prioritize that? I think obviously we have seen competitors in this region getting access to our own customers, right? I would say through the back door, and that was one reason. But I think it was mostly driven by the opportunity itself. Right, so we've been actually preparing this for a couple of months since early this year. You guys obviously saw the announcement at some point, but we've been working on this for a long time. Yeah, for myself, it's a fantastic new adventure to build something again for Adyen.
No, definitely. It's great to have you guys in this region as well. I mean, definitely with the more players and with a global player like Adyen moving in, there's going to be a lot of innovation happening and a lot of servicing for the merchant, who's really the end customer. And so you said you came from Brazil, and that's an interesting place because Brazil is an emerging sort of ecosystem as well, and digital payments and in payments in general, I guess. And it's a massive market. So, and it's quickly changing, and it's very different than the US or in Europe. And I guess there's a lot of similarities. Do you see a lot of similarities between what's happening today, for example, in Brazil, and what are you seeing happening in the Middle East at the
time? I think Brazil is one of the most difficult markets when it comes to payments. If you see where it came from, but also the infrastructure set up there, and that experience has, I think, prepared myself, but also the company. To conquer new territories. So around 10 years ago, the market opened. So Brazil was duopoly. There was one acquirer for Visa, one acquirer for MasterCard. So that was your choice with abusive fees. Then the central bank had made a change of regulation, which allowed also other parties to apply for an acquiring license. And we entered the market in 2010, and we are there full acquire now. And that over the span of the 6 years that I've seen so many things change. If you go to Brazil, you would see that every person selling something also out on the street, they have a payment terminal, small Bluetooth device or anything. Cash hardly exists there now. And it was that cash, just like here, cash was king there 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So we've seen that almost completely disappear. You see merchants there now operating wallets that can be used with other merchants, or I used to have a lot of wallets from merchants on my phone. And that is because of the financial ecosystem changing over the years and being extremely friendly for innovation. And I think that's what we'll see here. That is one of the reasons why we also landed in the IFC, where we find a very friendly environment, a very hungry environment to contribute to change. So yes, absolutely, I see similarities. I can only hope that the things will change here in a similar fashion for merchants, for shoppers, for everything, the entire ecosystem.
Okay, amazing. And you know, the Middle East, as you probably have seen already, the regulatory environment is quite different in each market. So instead of facing one market like Brazil, where there's one regulation and then you have to tackle it, now you have to deal with multiple markets with multiple regulations, and each at a different level, I would say, of maturity and progress. So how do you plan to kind of tackle this diversity of landscape that you're going to face moving in?
That's something we have to deal with, so to say. I mean, I was talking about Brazil, but we were managing the entire Latin American region out of Brazil. Okay. So we were dealing with extremely complex markets like Argentina and Chile and Colombia. At the same time, we saw, for example, Mexico adopting also a way more friendly attitude towards innovation over the years, but went into a different direction than Brazil, for example. So that difference I think is part of the game. So we just have to cope with it. It's not a homogeneous environment like Europe, for example.
That's part of the challenge and the opportunity, I guess, at the same time. Okay. Yeah. You know, the first time I heard about Adyen was like maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And I was running the product for a company where we had digital payments on a mobile application. And one of our challenges was our payment experience completely was broken. We had to go through like 7, 8 steps to kind of go finalize that payment step. And we had those little windows, you know, these iframes that customers had to go in. And it was completely a mess. But I remember that Adyen at the time, I got to know them because you guys had figured out the API, payments through APIs, and it was one of the first companies providing that at a global. And I always think of you as the guys that tried to solve the user experience and payments and understood the importance of that part of the purchase funnel. So a lot has happened in the past 7 years. How do you see Adyen now? Is that part of user experience is still something that you focus on and you try to expand it, or how did you guys progress over these past 7 years? How do you see that?
That has not changed, but I think the demand is coming from another angle. The product that we sold 10 years ago is something that we could not sell it anymore now. So 10 years ago, we were the first ones doing a completely customizable hosted payment page. So it was a full redirect in your own branding, PCI compliant. That sold itself on the spot. Right. Now you cannot think of a large merchant doing a redirect to a payment page, even if it's nicely branded. They want to have everything in their own environment. So that's user experience, right? So back then we were very much, selling this. Now merchants are expecting this, to be able to offer APIs, integration methods to completely fit into their environment, no matter the sales channel, to facilitate a frictionless checkout. So that has not changed. You see now that merchants have become so incredibly professional and good at what they do when it comes to payments in many markets that sometimes it's even hard for us to keep up with their demands, right? And they come with new business models. They come with new sales channels, and we have to constantly keep innovating to keep servicing our customers.
Okay, So what do you think?
And to add to that, when you talk about user experience, it's we are at the very end of the sales funnel, the very last second when the merchant wants to get the money from the shopper. And if that fails, that has been it's the most expensive drop-off that you can get in a sales process.
Correct. There's a lot of responsibility there on you guys. Yeah. So how do you? So merchants today in the Middle East, what should they expect out of Adyen? You know, in terms of whether you're helping them in improving an existing digital payment experience or moving to digital payments for the first time. What should the merchants be looking forward to? And now that you guys are here,
we like to challenge the status quo, and we like to raise the bar for ourselves, for our merchants, for shoppers, for everyone. And that's what our merchants also give us back, what they like about us. We were not just in here basically to, I would say, compete on price and then say, okay, thank you for your business and let's move forward. We like to be really close to our to our merchants and try to get the most out of it. Now, what you've seen here this year is that customers, a lot of merchants had only a few % of their business online, some of them in retail, for example. When the pandemic kicked in, that suddenly became 100%. So suddenly the part of the business that was not really looked after, suddenly is on a magnifying glass. So certainly it becomes important to work with partners that, for example, do not have downtime. We like to say that we have a Black Friday on our platform every day, if you look at the kind of customers that we have globally. For us, if we have a minute of downtime, just imagine the hassle we get to explain that to customers like Uber, that there's an Uber ride happening somewhere on our platform, somewhere on the world, right? So that is part of us constantly trying to keep the bar as high as possible. When we spoke earlier this week, I gave you the example of, I have them here, a few international cards in my wallet. And this is the first time in many, many years that I go somewhere that I have to have cash as a plan B with me, or cannot go with my phone and rely on that every transaction will go through. It's some of you might think it's a balance issue, but
spending too much.
I leave that in the middle. No, but my payments get declined, and I was telling you before this. My wife went to a grocery store here around the corner, and she texted me. She went only with her phone, and the payment got rejected on Apple Pay.
Wow.
I have the same card that I used for just tapping, rejected, inserting with the chip. And it got accepted. For me, as a payment nerd, so to say, that's unacceptable. I like to understand how that is even possible. And that's why we like to bring technology. We have one here of our payment terminals, both online and offline. We just want to make sure that our merchants accept every single customer that goes to the checkout. And that's how we like to be pushed by our merchants to reach other levels, but we also will be pushing merchants to say, hey, you're neglecting your payment infrastructure, even if you already work with us. But if you don't really look how to optimize that further, you're not going to get the most out of it. So that's what we're definitely going to do. The other thing is what we've seen when we went into the physical environment around 8 years ago. The channels are converging, right? So a shopper can go on your e-commerce site, but can also go on your physical environment. How do you deal with that? How do you recognize shoppers across channels? How do you make sure that payment credentials saved online can be used, for example, in the store or the other way around? So that's also something that we are going to bring to the market here.
So your business today is mostly digital, like most of the transactions I was looking that is really on the digital part, maybe 80-90%. I was looking at an article recently. Should you approach it like in the Middle East? Are you going to approach it in a similar way where you're going to focus on first digital merchants and then maybe later on you tackle the physical? How's your strategy along those lines?
That is partially legacy for us. We just simply started in e-commerce earlier. In the reality is that, of course, e-commerce scales faster, and there are some markets where we have been active on e-commerce so much longer than in the physical world. Give Brazil as an example. We're now the biggest online processor in Brazil, but we have fairly little presence with physical transactions because we literally just started there. So that will pick up, because in the end of the day, globally, still 90% of commerce pre-pandemic was physical. And if you see, yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't have the latest number on that, but it's definitely different this year. Yeah.
Yeah. And so based on that, how did you see like the consumer, like from the data that you guys have across the world, like how did the consumer expectations change? Because a lot of them have been going to physical, and then suddenly overnight they had to switch and go through digital payment experiences that some of them may not have been using. And did you see any change of behavior that impacts your product, impacts what you're trying to do this year and moving forward?
Oh yeah, absolutely. From one day to the other, going into lockdown, but still merchants wanted to sell things. Of course, we would like to enable that for our customers. So the ability to send payments by link, or I was at GTEx earlier. If you go to the food trucks there, you can only order and pay through a QR code, right? So there's literally no interaction with the terminal possible. And that also means that terminals need to be able to accept all cards. So what we've seen, for example, is a much faster than anticipated adoption we got more requests for adding Chinese payment methods for some of our customers in the US. And for us, it's just literally a button, and on all your stores there's WeChat Pay or Alipay. Whereas or to enable those payment methods online suddenly, because people do not buy expensive watches anymore in your store, but they go online. So we need to not just have American Express, but also WeChat, Alipay to service all our customers. So we got those kind of requests almost immediately when countries went to lockdown.
So on that, do you, like local is a big thing for Adyen, like for you to kind of execute is the local partnerships that you put in place. How's your coverage looking for MENA today? And what are some of the local payment partners that you already have on your platform that merchants can expect to see?
Yes. Going local for us is essential, right? So we have seen, for example, also, sorry to talk about Brazil a lot, but that's a big part of my experience. We went with a local team in 2011. So we opened office there already in 2011. It was our first office outside of Amsterdam. And what we've seen other I would say international competitors trying to enter the market the years after, but doing it out of the US, out of Europe, developing teams there, just doesn't work. Right? If the complexity in some markets is just simply too big to conquer from abroad. So that's something that was a lesson for us, a good lesson in this case, and we see the same thing here. So whenever we open a market, we want to do it well. So for us to basically say, hey, we're going to offer a real meaningful online and offline product, but we're going to do it out of Amsterdam, and there will be nobody to talk to here on the ground, that just doesn't work. So we basically split our offering in the region in two. So here in the UAE, we will do both online and payment terminals. For now, at least, we also like to think in phases. That's the first phase. In the region, in a few countries, we are offering online payment methods like Misa, like Mada, Fori. So that's that's already done. So that's already available on the we currently do not yet have plans to go physical in those markets.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I'm gonna also open the stage for some questions from the audience. So if you guys have any questions along the conversation, please feel free to shoot them in the chat box, and we'll try to answer them as soon as we can during the conversation.
And I also have a question for the audience, because if someone can talk to challenges that one of you have faced here, just like I have now. Now, probably it will be over once I have local cards, but similar kind of challenges when it comes to payments or working with banks or acquirers. I'd love to have that conversation with you.
Awesome. Guys, shoot some of your challenges for us. Let's try to figure them out. Okay, so Sander, you know, a classic saying in the tech space is the future is here, but it's not evenly distributed, right? And I can see that more clearly than in payments and in digital. And you spoke about like the what's happening in China, completely on a futuristic level of payments, and that happened over a period of what, like 6-7 years, maybe 8 years ago. This was not existent. Same thing with Brazil, what you've mentioned. So what do you feel like MENA, the Middle East market, needs to do to kind of bridge that gap of futuristic execution, and how you guys are going to play an active role in that?
I'm not sure they really need to bridge a gap. I think every country in the region will do it in its own way. I think the UAE itself is on the right path, I would say. The hunger that we have seen over the past couple of months from regulators to facilitate an entrance for us here, the openness that people have to have conversations with us, to say, hey, how there's just a lot of hunger. And based on the demographics here, I mean, Brazil, not even 1% of people are expats. Here, it's, what is it, 80-90%. That in itself means already that we as a payment company and merchants need to cater for completely different needs. So I think with our entrance here, there will be more choice. After us, there will be many more. I'm not afraid of that at all. We are not. Competition is healthy. You'll see purely local players coming up. You'll see large international ones coming in, and ultimately we're going to drive this industry to a better position. Now, the fact that we are doing online and offline, that also means that we're going to play that game in the offline world, and that's where what I've seen until now, there will ultimately have to be a shift of mindset to be able to change and to get rid of legacy, to think about different shopper flows, pure omni-channel shopper flows. Omni-channel doesn't mean, hey, I have an e-commerce, hey, I have a store, and that's it, right? That's going on for 15-20 years, if not longer. And then suddenly call it omni-channel, that's not the thing. It's about, okay, someone buys something online, can they pick it up in store? Can they return it in store? Is someone, I'm selling subscriptions online, but I also have a physical environment. What if someone walks into my store and can sell that subscription with the first transaction on a terminal, and based on that transaction, we can subsequently charge that card? No fraud risk. Right? So those kind of things we're going to bring here. So if we in that way can contribute to an ecosystem here where there is more innovation, we will be copied. That's fine. That's totally fine. This is not our end game, right? We're also going to keep innovating. There will be companies in the market here that will come up with innovative solutions that we will be jealous of. I think that's part of an environment where it's part of a very liberal environment in general, and there will be choice. I think that's fantastic for everybody.
That's great. Oh, that's great to hear. So in terms of being local, one of the questions from the audience is, do you have direct carrier billing in your product? So in terms of asking that, because conversion rates usually perform better than cards with direct carrier billing. Is that something like going to be available in your product here in the region?
Not for now. We have done that in some markets, but that's long ago. Those products disappeared there, and it's not always that the regulatory framework either allows it or that those carriers would like to give us access to those products. But it's definitely something if something is relevant for a market, for certain industries, then it's definitely interesting. My experience with those products is that they're typically insanely expensive. 30, 40, 50% is not uncommon. So for what part of the market is that relevant for us as well, right? Do we service customers that are interested in that and for which this is significant? At the same time, you see companies working with, for example, iTunes, and they're getting, what shall I say, they feel, let's sort of use the word, screwed by the high fees that Apple pays. They're trying to get away from that. So why would you pay 30, 40% to a carrier then instead?
All right. No, that's true. That's true. And speaking of regulation, also, there's a question from the audience, from Shema, is that what kind of education you had to conduct with Brazilian regulators, right, to help them accelerate their growth, and what are some of the advice in terms of failures and successes and learnings that you think the MEA regulators they can bring to the Middle East regulators? Is there anything specific?
I wouldn't actually say that Brazilian regulators have always made the right choices.
Okay. Interesting.
And you see interests, just like here, play a big role, right? You see that traditional incumbent banks probably have a big influence with regulators. We see that in many markets. You see that Visa, MasterCard have a huge influence on how regulation develops. What I've learned is that the moment large merchants start contributing to that conversation, then things change. So we have seen initially in Brazil, very large international merchants such as Facebook, Google, Uber, not to forget, with their model where 3D Secure used to be mandatory, or is still mandatory for debit cards in Brazil. And for online, in a lot of cases, 3D Secure is mandatory as well. They have convinced, yeah, exactly. So they actually have sat together with regulators. They have sat together with issuers and just say, sorry, we're just not going to do it. It just doesn't work for us. And they also bring labor, right? So once these companies set foot in a certain market as big as Brazil, there's an interest because they bring jobs to the country. So there's certainly an interest to actually listen to these companies and say, okay, so what do you need? So we've seen Netflix being able to convince all issuers, or almost all issuers in Brazil, to do recurring debit cards without 3D Secure. Took them 2-3 years. With traditional acquirers, then not being able to accommodate that. So they've been able to convince the issuers, okay, for your business, we give you a waiver, but then the acquirers couldn't do it. And then with our platform, we could actually bring it to those merchants. So yeah, you'll see and I think that's also where organizations like Fintech Galaxy play a role to facilitate also, I'm not sure if you're actively doing it, but facilitate conversations with regulators and trying to influence them into adopting a more liberal framework. And there's a lot of good examples out there. For example, in Europe with PSD2, some things we like, some things we don't, but in general, it's good. It's a good framework that is now being put in place. Rest assured, we spend a lot of time with regulators to talk about the initial versions of a few of these designs, because they did also not make sense. So to have those conversations ourselves, but also merchants, and stimulate them to take part in this conversation, that makes a lot of sense.
So
there was a second part of the question that or was this?
No, I think that's covered. I think that's covered for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Ayman and Sander. There's also a question from Bashar Saleh. He would like to jump on the call. So Bashar,
Sure.
I'll unmute you.
Yep.
1 second.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, Sander. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Richard, for the introduction. So, Sander, I hope all is well. I have a question for you. So, with Adyen and Stripe and other international players eyeing the Middle East as an expansion, what do you think this says, and what's to be expected of other existing payment providers in the region, as well as other acquiring banks that have more or less been a bit slow in adopting new and modern technology. What do you think the landscape or the future for these different players is going to look like, given the expertise and the experience that you guys saw internationally?
Change is unavoidable, I would say. So if you take the current market shares and if you then fast forward 3 years, that picture will look completely different. You'll have winners, you'll have losers. It's a very simple answer, I would say. You'll see that some banks will be able to see the light and are able to adjust, adopt, or acquire an interesting party and integrate. You'll see what we've seen typically, that large incumbents that are like real legacy banks, for which this is not really a space that they're always been very active in, but still have a significant market space, they will lose definitely a lot of market share over time. Merchants will start asking them, hey, I can get this and this from Adyen. You don't have it. I have a big part of my business with you. I have other business with you. I would like to discouple things. I'd like to have my this and this with Adyen or with Stripe, unless you can offer me the same thing within a reasonable amount of time. So you will see that merchant will start decoupling things. Instead of doing everything with a single bank, they start trying things out with companies like Stripe and Checkout and Adyen, and they simply see that it's better or easier. That the time to market of features and products from us is typically also shorter. I think that's the natural effect of a more open and more competitive environment. Does that answer your question, Bashar, or do you have a follow-up?
Of course it does. And I guess this brings a second part. What does this mean to the ecosystem generally? For like are we to expect newcomers, new companies that build on top of what you guys provide? Because Adyen is a very API centered, or basically it does provide a ton of integrations for fintech companies. And I'm not sure if you can share some of the expertise of like building an ecosystem within payments that you guys have seen in other parts of the market, and how you envision this might reflect in MENA as well.
No, yeah, absolutely. We see we have a platform product, so for marketplaces, for example. So what we then do with our APIs, we enable a marketplace, and Bashar, we have already spoken about this. We enable a marketplace to basically focus on selling a certain product to sub-sellers, whereas we take care of some of the things behind the scenes. And that's us. There will be others that will be and actually we are also making use, most of the technologies we do ourselves, but for example, KYC checks, checking identity, checking passports, and those kind of things, we also relying on other parties. We have a ton of them connected all over the world. Those companies also didn't really exist 3-4 years ago. So you see that they see a certain niche, they make a product with fantastic APIs that we then can use, and we can provide a complete set or a feature set or product set to our customers. So I absolutely think you'll see niche players coming up that focus on a very specific part of the payments value chain.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you, Bashar. We also have 2 questions.
Thank you.
From Dafir, and another one from Ronit as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Dafir is actually asking, what is the requirement for integration and traction, and do you offer escrow account service for crowdfunding?
What is the first part of the question, sorry? What are the requirements for?
What is the requirement for integration and traction? And the other one is, do you offer escrow account services, service for crowdfunding?
Integration for traction. Requirement for integration, I would say, you can get a test account anytime you can integrate, but I think in order to go live, I think we need to also have commercial agreement and so on. Yeah, we are very much focused on, I would say, the mid segment and the enterprise segment, but we also have quite a few very interesting stories with startups. I think we have a very appealing product that allows a startup to grow from a startup to potentially an enterprise customer. We've been working with Uber since they were small. We started with Groupon back in the days when they were very, very small, right? So we're not only, of course, if you see our website, you see a lot of blue chip names and everything. So we have a very accessible set of APIs. So yeah, I think in the end of the day, what I find most important is that our merchants appreciate what we do, that buy our services for the value that it brings to their organization. And on top of that, is also open to having conversations with us. Okay, the best conversations I personally like to have with the customer, say, hey, can we jointly talk about how I can get better in accepting payments? And I think when we do that, then we can have a conversation of which APIs to integrate. I have already done a few purchases here where I've sent screenshots of the checkout process to someone I found on LinkedIn, say, hey, this can be better. And that is me, again, being a payment nerd, trying to make things better. Even if that shop never will work with us, I hope I've helped them. But this is very core to what Adyen does. That conversation will then spark the kind of integration that is possible with us. Will we offer escrow services for crowdfunding? Well, we work with GoFundMe. So in general, yes. It typically depends on the regulation in a certain market if we're allowed to do so, the license that we have. At this moment, this very moment, if you would ask me today, I would say, no, we don't have it yet. But it's definitely something that is something we are, that's in the back of my mind, also for the marketplaces that we like to power here in the region.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, on that point, Sandra, I have just an intervention. So on that point, we have a lot of merchants, like I see this a lot here, where are the smaller types of merchants who want to enable their digital stores. There's a lot of D2C type of companies popping up. They want to sell their goods on Instagram, on Shopify, all of these. And it's always a challenge for these small players to get a payment gateway. That's what it's known here in the region, to get them accepting their store. So are you going to be looking closely into that market? Are you going to facilitate that? Or as you said, you're focusing mainly on the SMEs and the enterprise sector. Should they look forward basically to having a good, fast solution now that you guys are in town?
Yes, I would say yes. Obviously, if you look at the sales team, they naturally always go after the segment that's basically those are the core focus of us. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of small merchants on the platform. What we have tried to build over the years is much self-service as possible. So you can integrate our APIs, you can go to our documentation environment. It's really simple to integrate. So the service that they can get from Adyen versus trying to integrate one of the gateways or APIs from one of the traditional banks, probably that experience is much better. Will they get a personal dedicated account manager? To be really honest, probably not. Right? That will be difficult for us to provide. But one of the we do our NPS scoring and everything. One of the feedbacks that we got from everywhere in the world is the level of quality that people get from our global support teams. We have 24/7 support from all regions, very qualified people. So yes, absolutely. If they have a question, they get an answer, quick answer, a meaningful answer. So that makes a lot of sense. We try to solve as much as possible via APIs, and also the back office is very intuitive. So our merchants should be able to join one of the training sessions that we do once a month, and then it should be able to get going. So yeah, absolutely. And that's and what we've seen as actually as part of the pandemic. If you talking to about one of the things we saw already new companies popping up that are actually facilitating payments acceptance, and that's actually points checkouts is one of them for smaller merchants. If you're a restaurant and you're closed, or you're a food truck and you normally have a payment terminal, but you now need to have a QR code. We normally wouldn't target that food truck, right? That's not our immediate customer. Sure. there are probably thousands of food trucks on our platform accepting payments through Adyen infrastructure because they're companies that facilitate an infrastructure for them, and behind the scenes, it's actually Adyen processing that payment. And maybe we're settling that food truck directly to our platform's product. So, yeah, and we're actually also stimulating those partners. I can, if that food truck will give us a call and say, hey, can we work with you? Can you give us some help? And say, hey, maybe it's better for you to integrate that partner. Then you have all their features, which are probably a better fit for your business. And behind the sales, behind the scenes, you still work with us.
Okay, I see. Very interesting. Richard, do you have
Yes.
any?
So there's, before I just go to Ronit's questions, Sander, could you tell us like what segments is Adyen focusing on, especially, you know, within in the MENA region in general?
That's not really different than what we do globally. So we have obviously our large enterprise segment with what we call mid-market. Yeah, and the long tail is, I would say, it depends a little bit on the market. Given that we're in the phase where we are, we're definitely in the phase where we like to look at, okay, what is a good fit for us here? We're still in that phase. A merchant doing five transactions a week with an extremely complex legacy environment and not taking payments too seriously, probably that's not a good fit for us. Whether or not they have an alternative, I also don't know. Right, so that will be, but yeah, we have the best fit with companies that are taking payments seriously in general, and it could be a large enterprise customer, but also a small customer. I think that's the and then we in some markets we have we accept everything approach. As the more we can automate, the more we can offer a self-service product, the easier it is to work with every segment. And again, I talk about Brazil. It's extremely complex. In Brazil, we work way less with the long tail because it's difficult for those organizations to work with a platform that we have, and it's also for us difficult to make that financially viable, given the extremely long time you were trying to work something out that is actually successful, and that is in Brazil. There's so much choice that I can safely say we do not have a choice. We do not have a fit with every merchant. And there is something good for everybody out there, and I hope this ecosystem will develop in the same way, that there will be something good and fitting for everybody. A merchant might find a checkout a better fit, or Stripe a better fit, or there's a merchant that wants an amazing unified commerce solution for both online and offline, and think, hey, that's got to be Adyen.
Interesting. You know, building up on what you mentioned about the differences you found in the market in Brazil, Ronit is asking, what are the biggest differences and similarities between UAE and MENA versus Brazil in terms of market?
I think a big difference that I at least now in Brazil, there are a few very successful Brazil only domestic card schemes, right? So there is Elo, there's Hyper. If I take that card outside of Brazil, it usually cannot be accepted anywhere. So you see, actually, there are challengers to Visa, MasterCard, American Express in the market. You also see that in terms of differences, Brazil is a little bit more unfriendly to foreign exchange and protecting their own territory and currency, whereas here with such a high percentage of expats, money transmitter services you can find them everywhere. They're very, very successful here. So that's a big difference. In terms of similarities, I would say the hunger to innovate Brazil is also a market that very much looks at Europe, what's happening there with PSD2, with GDPR. A Brazilian version of GDPR is already put in place, and I sense the same over here. What I've also seen over the last year is that, given the complexity in Brazil, venture capitalists have tried to be successful in Brazil. A lot of them have left already. SoftBank came in with big bags of money 2 years ago. They have done some investments around $1 billion in a company called Rappi, one of Adyen customers. That's a lot of money. And if you then compare it to the typical tickets that we saw in the market, people didn't really understand why. And not that those companies are not good, but the difference was simply too big. And I think they've underestimated the complexity in the Latin American market. There's this famous saying in Brazil that says, Brazil is not for beginners. And it's true. So a lot of companies have entered and left already. What I see here is typically, what I expect here is that it's more friendly for, it's a way more international environment. So the things that you'll see happening here, probably you see also in other markets infecting each other, like Saudi Arabia, Egypt making changes, and UAE wants to do something similar. So I think there's way more of a joint effort towards something good, whereas in Brazil it was in that sense a little bit more literally country by country. Yeah, that's a few of the differences that I've seen. And I think one thing that I would also really like to see here is that in Brazil for the last year, I've never had cash. Literally everybody has a payment machine, or there's an online environment to pay. And cash on delivery is just literally non-existent there. It just doesn't exist. Also probably because if you talk about differences, the safety perception between both countries is completely different. The chance of something happening in Brazil, unfortunately, is a little bit higher than here. So there was
higher incentive to make the switch.
Yeah, so to go towards digital payments, tap and go payments, card payments was also driven by, hey, we want just cash out of the society.
That's perfect.
Great.
Sander, one last question before we wrap up the session, also from Ronit. He's asking, will you be working with local payment processors in UAE, or will you be doing it yourself?
I find it a very strategic question. I think generally we like to do as much as possible ourselves. That's one of the reasons, for example, why we've never done acquisitions, why we've never insourced any third-party product for a significant part of our processing. That's why we never outsourced labor. Everybody that is built on the Adyen platform and has been writing code for us have always been employed by us. And for the same reason, wherever we could, we have applied for our own licenses. Now, is that something we typically do when we enter a market? No. All right. So I think for us, the partnering with a strong local partner is very beneficial to learn to understand the market, to conquer the market together, and then we take it from there. So plans are always there to do as much as possible ourselves, but there's also markets where we've been running on acquiring partners, infrastructures, or licenses for years. And if you look, for example, in Europe, where we had our first acquiring license, we still operate some of our volume on the infrastructure that we had with our very first partners. So we take partnerships also very seriously.
Okay, that's perfect.
All right. So Sander, do you have any last messages for the MENA audience?
No, but I'll leave my email here in the chat for everybody.
Yeah, that's great.
So please feel free to reach out
Awesome.
if you have any follow-up questions. If there's anybody that wants to speak up and mention something or comment or anything, we still have time. Otherwise,
there's a question popping up now from Hamad. Do you have willingness to do partnerships with a company that deals with direct carrier billing? I think that's something we tackled earlier, but maybe Muhammad was not on the call. You want to readdress that?
Definitely want to have the conversation to understand that model a little bit better here for the market. No, absolutely. So feel free to reach out.
Andrew, I have a question. Is obviously the core markets are very important to you, like UAE for sure, Saudi, Egypt, massive markets. What should the smaller markets in the Middle East expect in terms of Adyen's new office and new presence here?
That's very difficult to say.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're smaller. It's in general, there's almost so much we can do in a certain period. Last year or this year, I think earlier this year, we opened Malaysia, last year Japan, India. And it doesn't mean that we go from big to small, right? It's also opportunity. And merchant demand. I think that's the most crucial thing. So if we're not going into a market because certainly there is a regulator that opens that lays the red carpet for us. No, unless there is merchant demand saying, hey, we really, and not just one single merchant. If we get that question over and over again, saying yes, we need to really consider going into the market, and it could be a large market, could be a smaller market, and then we're going to look at how feasible is it, how much effort is it, and then if we do it, we like to do it quickly. Yeah. I think what is definitely interesting there is that we've been able to accept payment methods already in smaller markets. So we have Oman, Benefit in Bahrain, NAPS, KNet in Kuwait. So doesn't mean that we're opening an office there, but we give our initial merchants access to those payment methods. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a very good first step.
That's great to know. And before, maybe we still have a few minutes, let's keep it. We spoke a lot about the acquiring part of the business. You guys have an issuance product as well. Is that something you're looking forward to into the region?
I'm personally a very, very big fan of what we do with issuing. I've been rooting for it for years. Yeah. But again, it comes down again to how much can you do in a given time frame. So I'm super happy that we've launched issuing last year, and that's also something that market by market we're going to look at the opportunity. The issuing world is a world that is definitely needing innovation and new players. And what we see is that Stripe went into that I think 2 years ago. They're raving about the use cases that they've seen for issuing. Yeah, it's no surprise to me at all. We see the same thing, especially in the gig economy. We see the number of use cases for virtually issued card or even real plastic. We see that increasing over time. So I'm personally a very, very big fan of our issuing framework. We're currently doing it in Europe and US, and there's a few markets that we're now looking at. It wouldn't surprise me that in a couple of years we're able to do it in more markets and potentially here as well.
All right, thank you for that. Any more questions, Richard? Anything else remaining in the panel? I guess. Oh, we have a new one coming up.
What kind of roles will you be recruiting? Well, it's funny. Once we did the announcement, there were a lot of people coming to me and to colleagues. Do you have vacancies open? We currently have a starting team. So we have a team that has been working on the launch, on the partnerships, on everything. We will be opening some commercial roles early next year, and then we'll take it from there to see where the need arises. We will most likely not put a tech team on the ground here, a development team. So that is very unlikely. But we'll have to see over time what additional roles we are going to hire for. But definitely going to hire to put roles up on our website early next year. That's the plan.
Awesome. Sander, I would like to thank you so much for your time with us today. It was really a pleasure having you, and so much insights from around the world and how this is gonna change the Middle East landscape. So welcome to the Middle East, and looking forward to the conversations going with us and with the rest of the fintech community.
Yeah, thank you as well. Not just you, but the entire ecosystem here. It has been extremely welcoming to us. Very, very, very interactive. There's a lot of, as I used the word already before, a lot of hunger. There's a lot of knowledge. I'm very pleased with the conversation that I've already had. So yeah, we're here to stay. We're here to contribute, and would like to thank everybody that made this hour available to interact and ask questions. So thanks.
Amazing. And thanks a lot to all of our audience. So have a great rest of the day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, bye.
Bye, Sander.
Thank you. Bye.